Prologue. The journey begins. Early Tammuz, June, July, 5 B.C. The hot Judean sun blazed down upon the three weary travellers as they crested the last hill. Behind them lay the Jordan Valley, ahead the forbidding walls of Jerusalem. They stood among a grove of young olive trees facing the great eastern gate. At their feet spread the Kidron Valley, running north to south from the Megiddo to the Dead Sea. From their vantage point, they could see Herod's temple glistening in the sun. It was said, if you have not seen Herod's temple, you have not seen the temple. For it was there Yahweh, the God of Israel, met with his people. Their journey from the Far East had taken longer than expected. Sandstorms swept across the Syrian deserts, forbidding their progress. Marauding bands of cutthroats from Petra attacked them. Poisoned water in the few oases they found dried their spirits as well as their mouths. Yet they trudged on. What started as a grand adventure to follow the ancient prophecy and a star turned into a test of their stamina and their resolve. Their entourage, once numbering 50-plus servants and soldiers, had long since been depleted. The few who survived the long journey to Israel became disheartened and slipped away from their masters. Only 3 wise men remained, and even one of them was quite displeased with the journey despite the ever-present star, which had led them on a true course. Their arrival in the mighty city caused such a stir among the citizens of Jerusalem that even the high priest and Sanhedrin came out to officially welcome them. After months of deprivation and hardship, it was a great relief to be treated like royalty. As their procession snaked its way through the ancient city, children danced in the streets, women threw fragrant flowers along the way, and old men bowed their heads. It was a grand occasion when men of such renown came to visit the capital of Israel. Jerusalem, a city known for its slaughter of prophets and priests, a city known for its violence and vice, a city known for its mighty kings, such as David, Solomon, and its most recent, King Herod. Thronged with Jews and Gentiles, free men and slaves, Roman soldiers and common citizens. At long last, they arrived at the gate of the upper city of Jerusalem, where Herod built his grand palace. Its 3 towers loomed over the weary travelers like mountains. They were so skillfully built that one couldn't tell where one marble block ended and the other began. For a moment, the wise men stood, their mouths gaped at the colossal palace, with its dozens of gardens, fancy pillars and courts, with groves of trees from all over the world, deep canals, cisterns, and bronze statues from which water poured completed the lush gardens. The palace guards, dressed in black and carrying swords and spears, ushered them into the throne room, where they stood upon a polished marble floor before the mighty and dreaded Herod the Great. He was clothed in a regal purple robe. A gold-leaf crown framed his short-cropped hair. A great sword with a jeweled hilt hung from his side, and he held the golden scepter. Appointed by Caesar Augustus to rule the small state of Israel, Herod the Great was one of Israel's most ruthless rulers. As a pro-Roman puppet, it was better to be his pig than a member of his family. Known for his extensive building programs, Herod's subjects, the Jews, took pride in Jerusalem's mighty walls, Antonio's fortress, and, of course, the magnificent temple built in his honor. It was with grand fanfare the small entourage approached the throne and bowed. "Rise and state your business," came King Herod's voice. His icy tone sent chills throughout the room. "We bring you greetings in the name of Jehovah." Balthazar, being the oldest and wisest of all magi, answered. The king scowled down at them. "From where have you come, and why?" It was not without some concern that Balthazar glanced from side to side, hoping Melchior and Gaspar would remain quiet. He cleared his parched throat and addressed the mighty king. Your humble servants have travelled from the east, following the heavenly star. We have come seeking a child who was born King of the Jews, that we may worship him. A deadly silence settled over the room. King Herod's grip tightened on his scepter until his knuckles turned white. The veins in his fat neck bulged and his face turned a deep crimson. "I think you just committed a major faux pas, Lord Balthazar," Gaspar whispered under his breath. Balthazar nodded slowly and took a step back. "What did I say?" "I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this," Melchior said in a low tone. The king narrowed his eyes until they were but slits, and he spoke through clenched teeth. "Did you say you have come to worship the King of the Jews? I am the King of the Jews. I know nothing of the birth of a new king," he bellowed. Shaken, Balthazar continued. "But, my lord, your servants are the Magi. We have the knowledge of the Most High God, as did Moses, Joseph, and Daniel. God has revealed to us that a child would be born of the seed of Jesse, a righteous branch, whose goings forth are of old." Herod slammed his scepter to the marble floor, sending shockwaves throughout the palace. "Enough, old man! I have heard enough of your drivel. You there," pointing to one of his advisers, "gather my counselors and the priests. I demand to know if there is any truth to this prophecy." While the three wise men waited, Balthazar watched the shadow move across the sundial. Finally, the high priest and scribes were rounded up and herded into the presence of the king. Angry guards forced them to bow before their potentate. "What is this I hear about another king being born? I have sired many children and chosen none of them to be my heirs. Who is this king?" he raged. The trembling men rose to their feet and faced Herod. Hatred burned in his eyes, but they resisted the temptation to lash out. To the side of the throne room stood a large table. The counselors were goaded around it and ordered to find the ancient prophecy. With care, they unrolled the dusty scrolls and began muttering in low tones as they studied their contents. What they sought was an obscure passage written by the prophet Micah concerning the birth of a messianic king. The wise men watched in silence as the high priest's bony finger traced the letters until it found the place he sought. Then he turned and faced the king. "So have you found the prophecy?" he asked, his tone a lethal mixture of loathing and impatience. The high priest licked his lips and glanced at the three strangers as if to say, "Why have you troubled us?" "My king, there is an ancient prophecy which states that a child would one day be born King of the Jews." His voice trembled as he spoke. "Where?" the king demanded. "Where is this child to be born?" The veins in his neck bulged, and his eyes breathed fire. "The ancient scripture states, 'And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel.'" King Herod sat back and rubbed his chin. "So it is true." His voice carried a sly edge. Turning to the three men, he raised his scepter and pointed. "And you say you have seen this star. How long ago?" His mocking tone echoed throughout the hall. Chuckling emanated somewhere in the periphery, and Balthazar felt his face redden. For a moment he considered disguising the truth, but rather than incur the king's wrath any further, answered succinctly, "It was about a year ago, my lord." Herod's brow furrowed as his calculating mind went to work. "Go and search diligently for the young child. When you have found him, bring me word again," he sneered, "that I may come and worship him also." Giving the men a dismissive wave, he moved on to other business. As the soldiers ushered them from the throne room, Gaspar, the young wise man from India, whispered, "That didn't go so well, did it?" "No, my young friend, it didn't. Not at all." A short time later, they were back on the dusty streets of Jerusalem. The only people who paid them any attention were a handful of shepherds who volunteered to guide the men to Bethlehem. After knocking the dust from their sandals, they mounted their camels and rode through the gate, leaving Jerusalem to wonder what the fuss was all about. "I have never been treated more rudely in my entire life," Gaspar muttered, still upset over their treatment. Melchior, the second oldest of the three, nodded. "In my native land of Persia, we would have been held in great honor, but we were fortunate. King Herod has a reputation for killing those who bring bad news, and the news of another king being born is particularly bad." Balthazar nodded in agreement. "Yes, God was watching out for us today." "I still think that star led us on a wild goat chase, in my humble opinion," Gaspar groused. "There you go again, murmuring at the provision of God. Were it not for that star, we would still be wandering around in the wilderness of Zen. That star led us on a true course. It was you, if you will remember, who thought he knew a shortcut through Mount Nebo." Melchior, an astute-looking wise man with a dark goatee, grimaced at the memory. "Yes, and we were lost for days up there. Who knows, we might have stumbled over Moses' bones at the rate we were going." Having been upbraided by his elders, Gaspar tried to hide his chagrin by offering a weak but irrefutable defense. "Balthazar, you have to admit, it did lead us to Jerusalem, which was definitely the wrong city." "Wrong again," interjected Melchior. "The distance from Jerusalem to Bethlehem is about 40 furlongs. That's pretty close, if you ask me, when you consider the leagues we've travelled to get here." Shielding his eyes from the blazing sun, Gaspar scanned the distant mountain range. "I dread the long journey back, and we won't have the benefit of that star to guide us either." Melchior and Balthazar exchanged dour expressions. "He's incurable," muttered Melchior. As the wise men approached the little village of Bethlehem, the house of bread, Balthazar stopped and scanned the area. It was nothing more than a wide place in the road. "This is not what I had envisioned as the place where a king should be born. It is only a few homes scattered and a dusty inn." After dismounting, Gaspar stood, his hands on his hips. "Look at this pathetic town. It is completely deserted," he complained. "They don't even know we are here." All at once, a stray dog came from behind an ox cart and started barking wildly. Soon, a whole chorus of dogs, from bloodhounds to chihuahuas, joined the cacophony. Fearing for his safety, Gaspar took off in a mad dash with the dogs close at his heels. He found a low-hanging tree limb and quickly climbed it. Melchior brought his camel to where he clung. "There, Gaspar. Are you happy now?" His silence was gratifying. Without doing much searching, they found the dusty inn and entered. Looking around, Balthazar called. "Anyone here?" The sound of snoring from the back room gave him an answer. Balthazar raised his staff and brought it down on the counter with a thud, and the sleeping innkeeper jolted to life. Standing on shaky legs, the innkeeper stifled a yawn. After a moment, his mind cleared, and he tried to put on his best front. "How can I be of service to you fine gentlemen this day?" the pear-faced innkeeper asked. "You can start by telling us where the child king was born, you fool," Gaspar blurted. Laying a weathered hand on Gaspar's shoulder, Balthazar lowered his voice. "Give the man a chance to speak, my impetuous friend." The dishevelled innkeeper made a failed attempt at straightening his robes, then addressed Balthazar. "I have it on good authority that a certain child was born with that moniker." His tone indicated he wanted some remuneration for his information. Balthazar took a step back and stroked his chin. I see. Yes, well, I think we can come to an understanding. Will 20 shekels cover your, expenses?" he asked, scanning the room for an empty wine flask. The greedy innkeeper licked his lips. 25. 22, and you will guide us to the child." The innkeeper slapped the counter with a ham hand as if he were an auctioneer. "Done! I'll get my donkey saddled and ready before you can say Caesar the Great." Within a few minutes, they found themselves walking a dusty cowpath to a lone house on the outskirts of town. "This is it, the carpenter's house," the rotund innkeeper said with a bow. His action reminded Balthazar of a magician finishing his grand revelation. "You will find the child exactly as I said. Now pay me." His lips parted into a toothless grin. Balthazar glanced at Gaspar and nodded. "Me?" he protested. "Yes, you. It's your turn to pay. That's the arrangement."